Hey, and welcome to Law and Society. So, today, before I begin this episode, I wanted to make clear that this is not about the law or it's not about the Constitution, about which I have some knowledge, some working knowledge. This is an observation from a global citizen who has been observing uh, trends, and as my undergrad degree was in history, I have this habit of looking at sort of larger contexts and how sort of macro view of how trends change. That has always sort of fascinated me. And so, in that context, today's episode is not legal, it is about global affairs. And as you can tell, the title, Sea Change in Diplomacy and the World Order. So, welcome to Law and Society. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe. And let's start. So, what I'll start with in the very beginning is a statement that the White House put out. And because this is the statement by the Biden administration, I would assume that there would be some people who wouldn't rely on this. So, for those of you to learn more about Trump's deal with the Taliban, search online for Trump deal with Taliban. You will find multiple sources about the deal. But I want to start out here. President Trump ordered direct talks with the Taliban without consulting with our allies and partners or allowing the Afghan government at the negotiating table. This was in the middle of 2018. In September of 2019, President Trump emboldened the Taliban by publicly considering inviting them to Camp David on the anniversary of 9/11. In February of 2020, the United States and the Taliban reached a deal known as the Doha Agreement, under which the United States agreed to withdraw all U.S. forces from Afghanistan by May 2021. In return, the Taliban agreed to participate in a peace process and refrain from attacking U.S. troops and threatening Afghanistan's major cities, but only as long as the United States remained committed to withdraw by the agreement's deadline, which was May 2021. As part of the deal, President Trump also pressured the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban fighters from prison, including senior war commanders, without securing the release of the only American hostage known to be held by the Taliban. So I'm not reading this to you as a critique of what happened, but this is the first example of the world, a world leader of a democratic nation, supposedly the nation that does not negotiate with terrorists, negotiated with the Taliban, who, by the way, the US government went to war against after 9/11, and Al-Qaeda and that whole bunch, of which the most moderate was Taliban. And it goes from that to the withdrawal from Afghanistan, or the military posture in Afghanistan, was always going to change because the war posture there was not sustainable. But the way that Donald Trump structured the deal, he directly engaged and ordered his administration to engage with an organization that had thousands in Afghan prisons because of their extremism. So, of course, after the United States leaves, the Taliban does not respect any of the peace process, anything. The Afghan government collapses, and now the Taliban is in charge of Afghanistan. Very well. That is, I don't recall. Maybe it has happened in history, but in the last 30 years, I don't recall where a democratically elected government, let alone the primary democratic nation considered by many in terms of power and wealth, the United States, negotiated with the Taliban and sidestepped the democratically elected government of Afghanistan in a way as to essentially throw away a near 2 decades long process that the Afghani people had become a part of, where they were electing their leaders, and then it collapsed, and the thing is, the world accepted it. It's the world accepted that a 20-year war posture wasn't sustainable, and whatever happened between that and the withdrawal and leaving Afghanistan to their to their devices, to the Taliban's whim, the world accepted it. The world accepted it. And so then we come to where we are today with Israeli negotiations with Hamas. To recall, on October 7th of last year, of 2023, Hamas orchestrated a terrorist attack on Israeli soil where they killed over 1,000 people in Israel and kidnapped hundreds and took them hostage. And the only reason why the negotiations aren't happening with the Palestinian authorities, or what would be the Palestinian Authority if Palestine were a recognized state, Palestine Authority is, I don't know what part they are playing in the negotiations, but the Taliban, sorry to say Taliban, but Hamas, the very organization that conducted the terrorist attack, is now negotiating a peace ceasefire agreement, presumably with the Israeli government through bypass channels of the Muslim world. I think Egypt is now the center of that negotiation. And the Palestinian Authority, or what would be a democratically-ish established authority, there's no condemnation of the terrorist action of Doha Hamas, and they are actually the ones who are engaged in diplomatic solutions. And why? The sole reason is that they have the hostages. There is leverage, human leverage, something that extremist organizations know very well how to, use in now global affairs. It's the door was opened by Trump, but history will remember that the door was opened by United States, a country that says we don't negotiate with terrorists. And then it went on to become this situation, which is effectively, if you put it out in a very short word, is, you could call it legitimizing extremism. And it's a huge loss to and a big check on liberal, democratically elected governments and that world order. Because that is, in terms of power structure, still the dominating world order, the liberal, democratic world order. And if not liberal in places like India, it's the democratic world order where the people get to have a say, because that's not how the Taliban would rule. And in the case of Hamas, if they end up becoming the government of Palestine, then you have a second state that is recognized by the world and accepted, that is ruled by an extremist group that got its way by taking hostages and killing over 1,000 Israelis. So it's really, I see this as a trend, and somehow all of this, this destabilization of the Middle East really helps out Iran because Hamas is funded by Iran, because Hezbollah is funded by Iran. I don't know if the Taliban has connections to Iran or not, but I would not be surprised. And the Taliban is definitely in a relationship with Pakistan. So this is, the extreme part of the far right agenda, where you let certain states go into these isolationist regimes and not care about human rights because it has become too cumbersome and it's just not in our budget anymore. That's the way that the world is going, and it's creating hellscapes for a lot of people in the short term and in the long term. And I feel like I wanted to talk about that today. Topic aside from Donald Trump, which I think is a dangerous trend that is legitimizing extremism and a breakdown in the power paradigm, or at least a shifting of the power paradigm, where the nation state versus another nation state warring, which is far more conventionally happening between Ukraine and Russia right now, versus what is happening under the purview of Iran, which is in the proxy of the Russia, Iran, China major axes of this generation. Now, I don't know anything, nor have I studied anything about China and Taiwan, so I won't go into that. But we do know that Chinese money runs the Russian world and the Iranian world, and that's what China has done. One of its biggest ways of dominating or wanting to influence world order is by economic means, and they've learned that from the Americans. And I don't understand the logic of siding, but with Russia or Iran, oil is a big motivating factor. But this is a bit very convoluted, right? So, the two big topics here were how democratically elected governments are now, we are in a world 23 years after 9/11, where the world has slowly but surely started to legitimize extremism and accept isolationism in certain parts of the world if it suits the larger, richer countries, their their national security interests. It's a debate to be had about democracy spreading versus nation building versus using a country as purely a jumping point for your war and just go into it and ravage it. It's we'll see. Time will tell what happens with Afghanistan and with the Palestinian existence and Hamas negotiating the deal to free these hostages. So it's a mess, and it's a world order that is far more dystopic than it was when I was growing up, and it keeps me worried, and so I wanted to just discuss it briefly. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon.